How honest are you with her?
Uh, I think if
Honesty is subjective.
Like you said, you like to sit on things sometimes to gather more information. Is that being honest?
Everybody wants somebody to be honest with them, but nobody's willing to hear that answer sometimes. What the fuck was that?
I think
You just wind up lying to yourself a little bit more and more as you go along to justify your behavior.
How do you find her values? Like how
I just straight up asked her.
most people haven't sat down and said, this is what I value or this is where I make decisions from. Like most people don't do that
Yeah.
generally. Even us, we didn't sit down to do that till we were parents.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys were kids when you first...
But I'm saying it's like people don't think about that. So I'm curious to, and ideally we like to think of ourselves like, I have the value, and then you don't act accordingly,
Yeah.
right? So
The values, I think, comes from looking at a relationship like a business, right? Like there needs to be a mission, there needs to be values. Those are how we make decisions together. And I think that's the way that I approached it with Marino, is just like understanding values. And even if they can't say the word, she kind of knew, right? And when she said one of the words was like integrity, that was really big for her. I was like, oh, that's like my number one, like integrity, being honest, being truthful. So once I saw that, then I started to learn about her childhood, and we had a very similar upbringing, like even culturally with food and where we lived, and you can identify the values there. And then when I asked her, sometimes people will express this long-winded kind of answer, and you can bring it down to one word.
Yeah.
And I think that's a skill that I have from coaching, and like being with Rances. Like Rances always has long-winded things, and then I take it and put it into like one word or two words.
how honest are you with her?
That's a really good question. I don't know.
We want to say, I want you to be honest with me.
Yeah, it's honesty I feel like honesty is like sexuality. It's a spectrum. It's like you
Yeah.
can be,
So, and that's what I'm asking. In your relationships,
Yeah.
both of you in your newer relationships, obviously we talk about integrity and that, but what does that really mean from a perspective of, like you said, you like to sit on things sometimes to gather more information. Is that being honest?
I think if the information that you're thinking about, if you're sitting in that and your behaviors are making negative impacts on the relationship, I believe that's lying at that point. Like if the relationship isn't improving or isn't in a stable condition, then I feel that whatever you're not expressing is almost dishonesty and lack of integrity.
If you're withholding,
If you're withholding that information, if you're like holding it in, then you're lacking integrity for me in my kind of perspective, because going back to a previous conversation, I don't believe there's a right or wrong. I believe there's either something's working and something's not.
okay.
no, you're gonna say
I
something.
was going to say, like, what is something not working? What does that mean? People who constantly argue with each other, is that not working?
I think it depends, because if you're constantly arguing but you're constantly finding a solution and finding a way to understand each other, then if that works for you, that works for you, kind of thing. But I think when it's like that constant arguing and nothing gets solved and it's just the same repetitive argument over and over and over and over again, it's like, what are y'all doing? Kind of thing. Because nobody's working on bettering the situation. They're just focused on that, like that, whatever moment that triggers them. And there's nobody talking about why it triggers them. Or maybe one person's talking about why it triggers them and the other person just ignores it. I don't know. It's hard to peer into other people's relationships. But I know with mine, and when it comes into the honesty stuff, honesty is subjective. Like I'm always honest with my actions and where I'm at and what I'm doing and stuff like that. But there's times where, like, when, like we talked about before, it's like, do you want my opinion? Do you want me to shut the fuck up? And you just want to vent to me? Because even in that case, like if you're arguing about something from work, right? And in my head, I'm like, I think you're wrong. But you don't want to hear that right now. What's that going to do for our situation? You know, But then it comes down to that certain point, you're going to have to be like, listen, this is why I think you're wrong. It's a time and a place.
Yeah.
I think it's really a time and a place to be open and honest, because not everybody's willing. Everybody wants somebody to be honest with them, but nobody's willing to hear that answer sometimes. And I think that's really, it's a personal thing. And I think everybody, it varies, and especially on the topic. I think with certain things, it's a lot easier to hear hear your truth about it compared to other things where it's like, it's a really sore subject. And it's like, how do you go about that? You know,
It's definitely not black or white.
it's definitely, it's
super gray.
Yep.
I think one thing that Rances does pretty often when he wants to tell me the truth, he's like, sometimes I'm afraid to tell you this because you're going to react or behave this way, and this is what I think about you, and blah, blah. He's not saying that I'm doing those things, but he's saying that that's what he believes about me.
Yeah.
In that moment, there are things that he's not being like honest with, but then he lets it out because it's the relationship is not moving forward. It's not getting the outcome or the objective that we're trying to achieve. I think I approach the same thing with like all my relationships. It's like, all right, first I look at like myself and I say, okay, what is bothering me about this? Like, where can I influence the situation so I can get the outcome that is desired in this relationship? When that doesn't happen, then that's when I have to say something, because I'm like, okay, I no longer have control over the situation. I have to now say something to be able to try to influence it.
I think that highlights the big point to answer that kind of question, because it goes into intention. Intention is what gives you information about, like, when you ask Paola, is this working, right? Is this working or not working? What's the intention of this? So what's the intention of our relationship? Jay, what's the intention of our relationship? If we're trying to edit this podcast, what's our intention, right? And if we recognize that we're going into different directions because we have different intention, now we can talk about intention, and that's when we know we're getting to the root of the issue.
Yeah.
But if we're talking here about just the base level stuff and not getting into any of that, then that's when it's not working, because we're not moving forward with it. So intention to me is what gives you that clarity of like, is this working or not working?
Yeah. And I will say that working with you guys with Vita Project and stuff like that has begrudgingly made me open up a little bit more and to actually have conversations about certain things. Those I'm like, I don't ever, just leave me alone. Is it gonna make you happy? Yeah, I'll do it. Just shut the fuck up about it. Just please stop it. And
But that was always one big thing that Rances and I talked when it came to influencing Jay or trying. Like, yeah, he's not gonna really go for it because he's getting like just be like, nah, I don't, and, you know. But then there's always like a life event that comes in and kind of forces you to do that.
Yeah. I think I'm a coachable, uncoachable kid. I think you give me a task to do, and I'm like, I got it. Then you like talk about your feelings, I'll do. I'm like, no.
Question
Negative.
for both of you. When it comes to, you're both in, like you said, serious, strong relationships right now. How has that changed you, if at all, in the last however long you've been with your?
It's made me softer and more empathetic towards people.
People in general, not just that person.
In general.
So as soon as you said the word softer, I wanted to ask you, what do you mean by softer?
By softer, I mean like I don't have to answer everything the way I want to answer it, and that there's more than one approach to it, and it doesn't always have to be my approach to it. Now there's always gonna be a hint, like how we talked about. There's always gonna be that little spice to it because it's just me. I'm Sour Patch Kid. But it made me be a little bit more empathetic into terms of like, okay, like I'm trying to understand, even if I don't agree with where they're coming from, I'm trying to get in their shoes to see why they're looking at it from that angle, and then that way I can assess how I'm gonna respond to the situation. And there's plenty of times like she's.
So by softer, you mean less righteous?
Yeah, less righteous, less headstrong, less arrogant. And I think it's just a matter of learning how to deal with her. Like going back to like what you said earlier, it's like you guys try to not yell at each other, right? Like I realized early on that like if I raise my voice to her, she shuts down. So that's not gonna solve anything. We can fight all day long. The minute I yell, she's gonna start crying or she's gonna shut down. What does that do? You know. So I learned I can't raise my voice, which is fine. I'd rather not have to raise my voice at somebody that I care about unless it justifies, I have to yell. But there hasn't been a situation yet that I had to yell.
Watch out for that car.
Yeah, but it depends on the day. Sometimes I'm like, watch out for the car. I was like, watch out for that. I tried to tell you.
You didn't want me to yell.
Yeah, it's like you didn't want me to yell. So it's just a matter of like trying to gauge the other person, and I think it comes down to like trying to assume without assuming too much, kind of thing. And it's just trying to gauge how they are, and I'm around my girl enough that we're each other's best friends. Sorry,
It's okay.
He's hurt. You see how red he's getting?
It's like, does she have 30 years with you? We're around each other all the time. I'm not, I used to want to go out all the time and go to the bar and stuff like that. Those days are over. I barely like going out. If it's not to the boxing gym, or now it's like to hear sometimes I'm like, I gotta like talk to people, or I'm like,
I don't want to.
Okay. I treat it like a fight. Like, okay, I'm talking to myself in the shower.
Psyching yourself out.
You can do this. You can do this. You can talk about your feelings today. It's gonna be okay. You'll shut down later. It's fine. But it's really just a matter of just trying to empathize with the other person. I think that's what I mean by being softer. It's knowing that my point of view isn't the only point of view. It's most likely isn't right, because I have a very warped sense of how I view things. And I think I could have been a lawyer, because I could spin shit. I could spin it to however I want it to feel. I'm like, that makes it right. So it's learning to let go of that a little bit, because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything for leadership, and it doesn't do anything for me, because is that the truth at the end of the day? It's subjective, but you just wind up lying to yourself a little bit more and more as you go along to justify your behavior. So it's learning to not justify my behavior when I'm acting like an idiot.
I think it's very similar to Jay. I think I've become a lot more empathetic. I will say that I'm less of a pushover. So I would say that like in my previous relationships, it was hard for me to draw boundaries. With Marina, I have my boundaries. Like, nah, don't do that. I don't like that. I don't want to do this. I was like, so we're very clear, and she's very respectful of that. I think with Marina, she's like, one of the things she had told me was like, if you could be anybody in the world, who would you be? She was like, Mother Teresa. Like, that was her thing. So then I was just like, oh, she's a really caring person. Just that. And sometimes I have duality with that, because I'm like, no, I need you to like stand up and fucking fight. And then that's one of like the areas that I'm like, I need you to draw boundaries so I know exactly where to stand. So I think I became less of a pushover, but I think that isn't necessarily because of Marina. I think it was more because of my previous experiences. So like I wasn't looking for validation in this relationship. It was more so like there's an intention, there's an understanding. I see her for who she is and what she could provide to our life together. And I'm going to see if it works. Like if we can build something awesome together, like a business. I mean, because like literally like,
because love is a scary thing, because love is fickle. No matter how strong people are like, oh, my love is undying. That's bullshit. It's not real. It's not, you could wake up tomorrow and feel a complete different way about somebody. Sometimes, I'm not saying it happens, but I think when you see it with people who have been together for a long time, and then, at year 10, they're like, we're done.
But I don't know, because like to me, it's like you don't see it. You don't see all the behind the scenes and everything like that. You've been seeing the front, the show that's been presented to the world, but you don't see it.
That's why I keep my shit private on Instagram. You see dogs and boxing and maybe a skateboard clip.
So like, people don't just wake up the next day and like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah.
I think it's stacking of time and things.
But that's what I mean by when they finally it's finally like they had that enough. They're like, all right, I'm done. Like, this is finally the straw that broke the camel's back, and now I'm done. So to everybody else, it feels like, oh, they just up and left out of nowhere kind of thing. And it's like,
to me isn't love, and then you say love is fickle. I'm like, love is not fickle. Love is ever present, and it doesn't change with the wind.
I guess I should say commitment is fickle. How about that?
Well, commitment's a choice.
Yeah. To love somebody is a choice, though.
Yes.
To
Yeah,
stay
it's
committed to somebody is a
it's an
choice.
action.
Yeah.
The idea that love is an emotion, like I think I've asked this question to like everybody that I know. I like love to me is not an emotion.
It's a verb.
Like there are many emotions and feelings that are under the spectrum of love, which is like, all right, you want to argue, you get angry. You're angry because you love the person and you're fighting to establish boundaries and set up and fight for a solution. Right? So love can also be intimacy. Love can also be care, compassion. Love can be fear. It can be all of these different things. Yeah. And it actually has to be all those different things in order for it to work. It can't be one or the other. So to me, love is a choice. It's an action, right? And people who, oh, we just don't feel like we love each other anymore. And I was like, you didn't do the work to keep it.
Well, it's not to keep it. Did you ever really?
Did you even love each other?
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't know.
Yeah. So like, I mean, when we talk about our relationship for years now, it's been close to 20 years of work. It's been 20 years of choosing each other. It's been 20 years of us growing and developing as individuals and coming together to get to know each other again. So like that's the work aspect of it. That's that's where it all builds from. That work of like committing. You're in line with that commitment, and every decision that you're making is based off of that commitment. The communication, the arguments, the decision of like, is this right or effective, is based off of that original commitment. So like if the biggest, to me, the biggest myth out there is the fairy tale of love, where it's like, hey, you once you fall in love, it's good and happily ever after type of thing. And that is the biggest BS, because that people actually believe that. Grown folks believe that, and I say that from a coach's perspective and helping people out. I say that from friends' perspective. Like I mentioned, a lot of friends reach out to us. People believe that. So therefore, they feel like, all right, I already made it past the entrance. I'm good. The work is done.
I feel like it gets harder. It
does, because you make assumptions.
It's funny that you said that, because I actually heard that from a college professor of philosophy that I got a D in, like my worst grade ever. But he has said the idea of love is false. It comes from the narratives of movies and music that we listen to, and that's the idea of what love is. And even romance, the idea of romance comes from what we've, like he said, watched, because in philosophy and politics, it's like that's the culture of a community. And my mom told me that later on in life, like as I got older, she was like, being in love, that shit is all in your head. That's what she told me. And I was like, nah, that's not true. It's like a feeling. And then I learned later on, I was like, yeah, it is all being in your head, because I thought I was in love with certain women. I was like, what the fuck was I thinking?
Infatuation. It was
infatuation.
Yeah.
It was like, then what's real love, and you don't really get to understand that until you've been in, essentially the root or the foundation of it is a friendship.
Yeah, it's true. I love you, bud.
I love you too.
You guys are so cute. Oh my god.
All right, so we're at over 2 hours, but I did want to say one thing that I wanted to talk about real quick, which is Paola and I have been talking about starting our own podcast on like the mindset of commitment, mindset of relationship, mindset of intimacy. And, if I want to ask the audience, if you think this would be something that you'd be interested in, let us know, and we'll get started on making this, because we've talked about it for years, and I think we're ready to do it if there's an interest for it.
Awesome. I like it.
Jason here with Mindset U, and I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for tuning in and watching us every week. Since Mindset U is taking a different approach, we need your help coming up with new topics of stuff that you want to hear so that we can give you the best quality possible and the best content possible in general. It's fun. Come on, help us out. Help us help you. Anyway, you can head over to vitoproject.com to watch any of the old episodes and any of the new upcoming episodes that are coming. You could also check us out on Instagram and on YouTube and anywhere else that you could possibly think of that you want us to be. Let us know. We'll be there. All right? Thank you so much.